I am sorry to tell you, one of the twins belongs to your husband, the other belongs to another man. That was what the doctor said, and my husband was sitting right beside me when he said it. Chidi's hand was in mine when the words landed. I felt it, the exact moment his fingers stopped being warm. Not pulled away, not snatched, just stopped. Like a man whose body received news before his mind did. Like a machine that had been running quietly for years, and someone had, without warning, removed the power source. I could not look at him. I looked at the doctor instead, Dr. Emeka Chukwu. A man I had trusted with my son's health for 3 years, who had weighed them and vaccinated them, and once sat with me for 40 minutes when Emeka had a febrile seizure and I was convinced I was losing him. I trusted this man, and he was sitting behind his desk with a manila folder open in front of him, and he would not meet my eyes, and the air conditioning was too cold, and my husband's hand in mine had turned to stone. "What did you just say?" Chidi's voice. Not loud, the opposite of loud. The voice of a man compressing something enormous into something very small and very controlled, the way you compress gas before it explodes. "Mr. Okonkwo, I understand this is—" "What did you just say?" Dr. Chukwu said it again. And the second time, it didn't land on me. The second time, it landed on my husband, and I watched it land. I watched his face receive it. I watched 13 years of marriage, of trust, of a love we had built from scratch with our bare hands. I watched all of it move across his face like weather, like a storm passing over land and stripping it clean. And then he turned and looked at me. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. I had never been looked at like that in my life. Not by this man, not by anyone. It was the look of a person staring at someone they thought they knew completely, realizing in real time that there is a room in this person they have never seen, have never been shown, and they are only now discovering that the door exists because someone else has just walked out of it. "Chidi," my voice broke on his name. "Chidi, I don't know how—" He stood up, walked out. The door didn't slam. That was almost worse, that he closed it quietly, with the careful, deliberate restraint of a man who did not trust what he would do if he stopped being careful. I sat in that office alone. The plastic uterus on the doctor's desk stared back at me. Somewhere on the other side of that closed door, my husband was walking through a hospital corridor, and I did not know, God help me, I did not know if he was ever coming back.
And here is what nobody tells you about a moment like that. Your mind does not go to the big things. It does not go to what will people say, or what happens to this marriage, or even how do I explain this to my children. It goes small. It goes strange. It goes to the most irrelevant detail in the room, and it holds on. What my mind went to was this. 3 years ago, when the twins were born, Chidi had cried. He was not a man who cried. He had not cried at his father's funeral. He had not cried during the miscarriage, though I had felt him shaking beside me in the hospital bed. But the night Tobena and Emeka came into the world, when the nurse placed them one after the other onto my chest, Chidi had stood at my shoulder and wept like a man being undone by something too good to have been allowed. He had touched their faces with one finger each, so gently, as if they were made of something that could dissolve. He had looked at me across the heads of our newborn sons and said, "Adaeze, we did it. We finally did it." I had thought, in that exact moment, with 2 babies on my chest and my husband's tears on his face, I had thought, this is the moment. This is what all of it was for. The 4 years of trying, the miscarriage, the injections, the grief. This. And now I was sitting in a doctor's office, and one of those babies, one of those boys that Chidi had touched with one careful finger and wept over, did not belong to him. Except that he did. He did. He had to. 3 years of 3 a.m. feeds and first steps and first words, and the way Emeka only fell asleep if Chidi sang to him, badly, always the same flavor song, completely wrong for a child. You could not undo that with a piece of paper. You could not undo that with DNA. Could you? I had only ever been with one man. That is not a sentence I offer you defensively. I offer it to you the way you offer a fact, plainly, without ornament, because it is simply true. Since the year 2007, since a second-year law student with an uncomplicated smile found me in the English department and refused to leave, I had loved one man. I had been with one man. I had never, not once, not even in thought, not even in the dark space where private thoughts live and are not required to be virtuous, wanted anyone else. So, if the test was right, if the test that had been run 3 times in 3 separate labs with 3 separate samples was right, then something had happened to me that I had not known happened. Something had been done to me. And somewhere in this city, or this country, or this world, there was a man walking around who did not know that he had left a child behind. My Emeka, my tongue between the teeth boy, my headlong runner, my son who had come out of me screaming and had not really stopped for 3 months and had made Chidi joke, exhausted and devoted, that this child had read the parenting manual and taken it as a personal challenge. My Emeka, who right now, while I sat in this cold office and my marriage walked out through a quietly closed door, was at home with his grandmother arguing with his brother over a yellow crayon, not knowing that the world had just cracked open underneath him too. My phone lit up. Chidi's name on the screen. I stared at it for a full ring. 2. 3. I picked up. He said nothing for a moment. Then, "Come home, Adaeze. We need to talk." Not, "It's over." Not, "I'm done." Not the words I had been bracing for, preparing my body to receive the way you brace for impact. Come home. 2 words. And I did not know, sitting in that chair in that cold room with the plastic uterus watching me and the doctor pretending to look at his computer, I did not know if those 2 words were mercy or the beginning of something worse than abandonment. But I got up. I picked up my bag, and I went home to my husband.
The drive from Lekki to our house in Bagada took 47 minutes in that afternoon traffic. 47 minutes of Lagos doing what Lagos does, indifferent, chaotic, alive, completely uninterested in the fact that one of its residents was falling apart on the 3rd mainland bridge. Danfos cutting lanes, Okadas threading through impossibilities, a woman selling pure water balanced on her head, moving between the stopped cars with the unhurried grace of someone who has never once doubted that she will get to the other side. I drove, and I performed archaeology. I went back 3 years. I dug. In February 2020, my company, Bridges & Associates, an advertising firm in Victoria Island where I was a senior copywriter, held its annual retreat at Sun Beach Resort in Epe. 2 nights, 3 days. Chidi could not come. He had the Aliyu commercial case, a sprawling corporate litigation that had owned his life for 6 months and would not release him for a weekend, not even for me, not even when I told him I needed him there, that I was tired and that 4 years of failed fertility treatment had begun to hollow me out in ways I did not yet have language for. We argued about it gently. We kissed at the door. He said, "Call me when you arrive." I said, "I know." I got in the car. The retreat was fine. The kind of fine that is actually not fine but functions as fine because everyone around you is being professionally cheerful and you do not have the energy to be the person who refuses to perform. Team-building games under a canopy, conference sessions with bad projectors, meals where the conversation stayed safely on the surface of things. And then, the last night, the bonfire. Someone had dragged logs to the beach behind the resort's fence. Someone else had organized the drinks, bottles of Hennessy belonging to the MD and a large cooler of something local, gin mixed with zobo and pineapple juice, sweet enough to hide its own danger. There was music from a Bluetooth speaker. There was firelight making everyone's faces into something warmer and softer than their daytime faces. I was not a drinker. Chidi sometimes said I could get drunk on the fumes of a corked bottle, but that night I was tired in a way that sleep could not touch, and the fire was beautiful, and nobody here knew the weight I carried, and so I drank. I danced. I remember dancing, a loose, joyful group of us on the sand, the kind of dancing that asks nothing of you except your body's surrender to the rhythm. I remember feeling light. I remember thinking, this is what it used to feel like, before the trying and the failing and the hoping and the grief. This is what it feels like to just be a person in a body at a fire. I remember him, Seun, Bankole, new account manager transferred from Abuja, the kind of man who enters a room already knowing where the best light falls. He had danced with me. I remembered his hand at my waist, easy and confident, the hand of a man who had never been told no and therefore never developed the habit of asking. I remembered laughing at something he said. I remember thinking, this is just dancing. This is innocent. Chidi would not mind this. This is nothing. And then, nothing. A cut, a gap, the film skipping from that moment to the next morning, when I woke in my resort room, in my clothes, shoes still on, mouth stripped dry, head pounding. I had told myself immediately, firmly, with the authority of someone closing a door that must stay closed. You drank too much, you danced too hard, that is all, that is the whole of it. I had showered, packed, boarded the company bus, called Chidi on the way home and told him I missed him. He had said, I missed you too. I have rice on the stove. And that was the story. A gap, a blank. Nothing to examine, nothing to confess, because there was nothing I knew to confess. But now, on the bridge, with 47 minutes to think, I went back to that morning and I let myself open the door I had spent 3 years holding shut. The ache in my body when I woke, the way I had sat on the edge of the resort's bed and felt a deep foreign soreness and told myself it was the dancing, the sand, the wrong shoes. The way Seun, Bankole, had not looked at me at breakfast, not avoided me, simply treated me as though I did not exist in any way that was worth his attention. The specific, practiced invisibility of a man who has decided that what happened last night will not be acknowledged in daylight. The way my second cup of zobo tasted different from the first. These were things I had noticed, and immediately, expertly, deliberately not noticed, 3 years ago, because the alternative, the thing the noticing pointed towards, was too large and too ugly and too violating to hold. I was holding it now. I pulled off the bridge and stopped the car on a side street in Oworonshoki, because my hands were shaking too hard to drive. Someone had put something in my drink, and while I was somewhere my mind could not follow, while my body was present and my consent was absent, something had been done to me. I was not a woman who had been unfaithful. I was a woman who had been violated. And from that violation, from that crime committed against me in the dark on a beach in Epe, while the fire burned and the music played and no one noticed, one of my sons had come. I sat in that parked car and I shook. And then I stopped shaking. Because the shaking was grief, and the grief was real. But beneath the grief something else was arriving, something hard and hot and directional, something that knew exactly where it wanted to go. Anger. Pure, clean, clarifying anger. I wiped my face. I started the car. I drove home to my husband.
Chidi was in the sitting room when I arrived. Not pacing, not waiting with his arms crossed in the posture of a man prepared for confrontation. He was sitting on the sofa with his elbows on his knees and his hands loosely clasped, looking at nothing. The television was off. The house was quiet in the particular way it is quiet when the children are not in it. A bigger, emptier quiet than silence usually is because it contains the shape of the absence. His mother had taken the boys to her house in Surulere. He must have called her while I was driving. The thought of that, of Chidi sitting in this house after leaving the doctor's office, making that call, keeping his voice level enough that his mother would not ask questions, the thought of the effort that must have cost him broke something small and important in my chest. He looked up when I came in. "Sit down," he said. I sat. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The generator hummed. Outside, a neighbor's radio played something faintly, a Yoruba gospel song, thin and bright through the evening air. "Tell me," Chidi said finally. "Everything, from the beginning.
Don't manage it for me, Adaeze. Don't decide what I can handle. Just tell me. So I told him. I told him about the retreat, the bonfire, Seun Bankole, the dancing I remembered and the gap I couldn't remember and the morning after and every detail I had spent 3 years refusing to look at directly. I told him about the soreness, the taste of the second drink, the way Seun had not looked at me at breakfast. I told him what I now understood those details to mean. I told him all of it. And Chidi listened. He listened the way he listened in court, absolutely, without interruption, without his face giving anything away. But this was not a courtroom. This was our sitting room. And at some point during the telling, I watched something happen beneath the surface of his controlled expression, something moving, shifting, like tectonic things moving far below ground, invisible on the surface, but reshaping everything above. When he finished, the room was quiet again. "Which one?" he said. The question split me open. Not because it was cruel, because it was human. Because he was a man trying to reorganize his love around a fact that should not exist, and the fact had a face, and the face had a name, and he needed to know which face, which name, which boy he was going to have to find a new way to hold. "Emeka," I said. And I watched my husband receive it. I watched the name land on everything it touched inside him. I watched him fight himself, watched the struggle as plainly as if it were happening on the surface of his skin, the way you watch a man drowning from the shore, unable to do anything except stay and witness and pray. He stood up. He walked to the window. He stood there with his back to me for a long time. When he turned around, his eyes were red, but his voice was steady. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to understand that however you answer, I am not going anywhere tonight. I am not making any decisions tonight." Ask. Do you believe what you're telling me? That you didn't, that it wasn't? I have never been with another man. The words came out of me like iron. Not willingly, not knowingly, not ever. I am telling you the only truth I have. He looked at me for a long, long time. Then he said, "I know." Not, "I believe you." Not, "I'll try to believe you." He said, "I know." The way you say something when it is not a conclusion you have reached, but a thing you have simply always known, a thing that was never really in question, even when everything else was. He came back to the sofa. He sat down. Not beside me, across from me. A careful distance, a distance that was honest about where he was. Not rejection, just honesty. "I need time," he said. "I know. He pressed his hand over his mouth. His eyes filled and he blinked hard, twice, refusing. "I need not to look at him differently. I need that more than anything right now, Adaeze, and I don't know if I can." "You will. You don't know that. I know you." He looked at me. Something moved in his face, not resolved, not healed, but something. The first crack of light under a very heavy door. "Go to bed," he said quietly. "I'll be in later." He was not in later. When I woke at 3 a.m., his side of the bed was empty and cold. I found him in the boys' room, sitting on the floor between their 2 beds in the dark, just sitting there, just breathing the same air as his sons while they slept. I stood in the doorway and watched him. He didn't know I was there. I watched him reach up and rest his hand on the edge of Emeka's bed, not touching him, just resting there, near him, close enough. The hand of a man who was working something out, who was sitting in the dark with his grief and his love and his confusion and refusing to let any one of them win tonight. I went back to bed, and for the first time since the doctor's office, I allowed myself to hope.
Here's the thing nobody prepares you for when your life explodes. It is not the big moments that destroy you. The big moments have a kind of adrenaline to them, a heightened clarity, a sense of being present inside something historic. You survive the big moments. You are built for them in ways you don't know until they arrive. It is the small moments. It is sitting across from your husband at breakfast 3 days later and watching him pour Emeka's cereal and not knowing, not being able to read for the first time in 13 years what is happening behind his eyes. It is the way Emeka reached up and grabbed Chidi's finger while he was eating, the automatic, possessive, completely unself-conscious grab of a child who has never once doubted his father's availability, and the way Chidi looked down at those small fingers wrapped around his and went very, very still. It is that half second. That is where the damage lives. Not in the arguments. We were not arguing. Not in the silences. We had always been comfortable in silence. It was in the half-second pauses, the almost imperceptible hesitations before his hand found Emeka's head. The way his eyes would travel from Emeka's face to some middle distance where he was doing the mathematics of love and biology and grief, an equation that kept coming out wrong. He was trying. I saw the trying. It was the most painful thing I had ever watched. A good man, a man of genuine largeness, fighting the smallness that circumstances were trying to install in him. And Emeka, my perceptive, watchful, emotionally intelligent 3-year-old, Emeka was beginning to feel it. I saw it first on a Tuesday evening, 2 weeks after the appointment. Chidi had come home late, tired from court, still carrying something heavy and invisible. Emeka had run to him at the door the way he always did, arms wide, headlong, certain. And Chidi had picked him up, had held him, had said, "Hey, big man," but the pickup had been a half-beat slow, just a half-beat, the pause of a man reminding himself to move. Emeka didn't say anything. He was 3. He didn't have the language. But I watched his face over Chidi's shoulder, and I watched something flicker in it, a small confusion, a question he didn't know how to ask, a cloud passing over a face that had, until recently, known nothing but sun. That night, after the boys were in bed, I sat across from my husband at the dining table. "He can feel it," I said. Chidi looked up from his case file. "Emeka," I said, "he can feel something is different. He doesn't know what, but he feels it." Chidi said nothing, but he set down his pen. "I am not telling you to be fine. I am not asking you to pretend. I know what I've handed you. I know what I've asked you to carry by simply telling you the truth. But Chidi, he is 3 years old. Whatever is happening between us, whatever you're working through, he cannot be the place where it lands." My husband looked at me for a long time. Then he said quietly, "Do you think I don't know that?" "I think knowing and doing are different things." Silence. "I'm trying, Adaeze. I know you are. Try harder." It was the hardest thing I had ever said to him. It came out with an edge I had not intended and also had entirely intended, the edge of a mother, which is a different and more primal thing than the edge of a wife. He received it. He did not flinch from it. He looked at me with the expression of a man who has been told something accurate by someone who loves him, and he nodded once, slowly. The next evening, he came home early. He came home with 2 toy excavators, one for each boy.
I told Ngozi on a Saturday. Ngozi had been my closest friend since Federal Government Girls College Onitsha, where we had shared a bunk and a mosquito net and every secret worth having. She was now a senior partner at a law firm in Lagos. She was the kind of woman who could receive devastating news without crumbling, not because she didn't feel things, but because she felt them quickly, thoroughly, and then immediately began thinking about what to do with them. I called her and said, "I need to see you. Today. Don't bring your husband." She arrived at my house in 40 minutes. I told her everything. She sat across from me at the kitchen table with a cup of tea she didn't drink, and she listened without sound. When I finished, she was quiet for exactly 10 seconds. Then, Seun Bankole. Yes. I remember him from the retreat. He transferred to Port Harcourt. Yes. Adaeze. she set down the cup. What you're describing, the gap, the soreness, the taste of the drink changing, you know what that is. I know what that is. You were assaulted. No one had said that word out loud until that moment. I had thought it. I had circled it. I had approached it and retreated from it for weeks. But Ngozi said it the way she said everything, directly, without the false mercy of softening, because she understood that some truths become more dangerous the longer you refuse to name them. Yes, I said. Okay. She straightened, her jaw set in the way it set when she was moving from feeling into action. I'm going to find him. Ngozi, not for the police, not yet. That's your choice, not mine, and we'll talk about it. But I'm going to find him because you deserve to know where he is and what he's been doing and whether he knows what he left behind. Information first, then you decide. This was why I had called Ngozi. There's something else, I said. She waited. I haven't told anyone, not my mother, not his mother, no one except you and Chidi. I looked at my hands. His mother called yesterday. She wants to bring the boys a birthday gift. It's early. The birthday is still 2 months away, but you know how she is. She wants to come this weekend. Ngozi understood immediately. She doesn't know. No. And when she comes, she will look at those boys the way she always looks at them. She will hold Emeka and call him her blood and tell him he has his grandfather's forehead. My voice was absolutely level. And I will have to sit there and smile. Ngozi reached across the table and covered my hand with both of hers. Listen to me, she said. This secret will not keep forever. You know that. At some point, on your timeline, in your way, in words you choose, this will need to come out. The question is not if. The question is how much control you have over the how. I know. Chidi's mother is going to be a problem. I know. We looked at each other across the table. Two women who had known each other long enough to have entire conversations in the space between words. Find him first, I said. I'll have something for you by next week, she said.
Chidi's mother arrived on Sunday in a taxi from Surulere with 2 nylon bags full of chin-chin she had made herself and a wrapped gift that turned out to be identical toy lorries for each boy. Her name was Ngozi Okonkwo, yes, another Ngozi, which had confused people for years, but we called her Mama. She was 71 years old and built like a woman who had survived things and did not find it necessary to announce the surviving. She had raised 4 children, buried a husband, run a fabric business in Oshodi for 30 years, and still woke at 5 every morning to pray for an hour before she did anything else. She loved those twins with a ferocity that was almost territorial. She walked in and the boys descended on her immediately, Tobenna already reaching for the nylon bags, Emeka already wrapping himself around her leg. She laughed, that big stomach laugh of hers, and lowered herself onto the sofa and pulled them both onto her lap, one on each knee, and said in Igbo, "Come, come, let me look at you. Let me see how you have grown." I stood in the kitchen doorway and watched. She turned Emeka's face toward her with one hand, cupping his chin. She looked at him the way old women look at grandchildren, searching, delighted, proprietary, reading the map of the family and the child's features. "This one," she said in Igbo, to no one in particular. "This one has his grandfather's mouth. You see it? Same mouth. Ejike's mouth exactly." Chidi, beside me, did not move, did not stiffen, did not give a single visible sign of what those words cost him to hear. But I felt him. I felt the effort of his stillness the way you feel pressure changing before weather. I went to the kitchen and I stood at the sink and I turned on the tap and I let the sound of the water cover the 30 seconds during which I pressed both hands flat on the counter and breathed. Then I dried my hands and went back to my family. After Mama left that evening, after the boys were in bed, Chidi came to find me where I was sitting on the back veranda. He sat beside me. We looked out at the small compound, the almond tree his father had planted the year we moved in, the boy's plastic slide glowing faintly white in the dark. "She said he has Papa's mouth," Chidi said. I heard. Silence. "The thing is," he said slowly, "she's not wrong. He does have Papa's mouth. I've thought about it, and the way Emeka presses his lips together when he's concentrating, Papa did that. I've seen it in photographs." He paused. How do you explain that with DNA? I looked at him. You can't, I said carefully. Not scientifically. No. He leaned back in the plastic chair, looked up at the sky. But Emeka spent the first year of his life being looked at by me and my mother and my aunts, all of us finding pieces of my family in his face. And maybe we found them because we were looking, because we needed to find them. He was quiet for a moment. Or maybe God has a sense of humor about these things. I did not know what to say. He is mine, Chidi said, simply, finally, not as a question, not as a decision being reached, as a statement of existing fact, the way you state the name of a city or the color of the sky. He is mine. I don't care what the paper says. I was there when he was born. I was the one who rocked him for 3 months while he screamed. I am the one he runs to at the door. He is mine, Adaeze. My eyes burned. Yes, I said, he is yours. But we still need to deal with the man who... He stopped. His jaw tightened. We need to deal with that. Ngozi is finding him. He looked sharply at me. Good. There was something in his voice when he said it. Not the voice of a grieving husband. The voice of a lawyer who has located a piece of evidence and is preparing what to do with it.
Ngozi found him in 11 days. Birmingham, UK. Married, 2 children. Working in brand consulting for a company none of us had heard of. Living the clean, unbothered life of a man who had left something terrible behind in another country and simply kept walking. She called me with the information on a Monday and said, "What do you want to do?" I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I want to talk to him. Ngozi, I need to look at him, Ngozi. Even through a screen, I need to look at the face of the man who did this to me, and I need him to know what exists in this world because of what he did. A pause. I'll set it up. The call was 3 days later. Ngozi sat beside me at her office desk. Chidi had wanted to be there. I had said no, not because I wanted to protect Seun Bankole from my husband, but because I did not want Chidi in the room when I was most vulnerable. This was mine to do. My voice, my words, my confrontation. Seun Bankole appeared on screen in a home office, bookshelf behind him, a cup of something. He had filled out, comfortable weight, comfortable life. He looked, at first, simply puzzled. A video call from an unknown number, patched through by someone who had said only, "An old colleague wants to speak with you." Then his eyes focused. Then he recognized me. And I saw it. Not guilt. I wish I could say guilt. What I saw was the calculation, rapid, instinctive, of a man assessing the dimensions of his exposure. The look of someone doing very fast mathematics about what is known, what can be proved, what can be denied. "Adaeze," he said carefully, "it's been a long time." 3 years, I said, and 9 months. He said nothing. "Do you remember Epe?" I said. "February 2020, the bonfire." "I remember the retreat." "Do you remember what you put in my drink?" The calculation shifted. Something moved behind his eyes, the machinery of denial preparing itself, organizing its defenses, building its wall. He leaned slightly forward, and his voice dropped and became careful in the way of a man who is deciding, in real time, how much of a thing he is willing to admit in a space where a lawyer is almost certainly present. "Adaeze, I don't know what you... I have a son." My voice was completely steady. It surprised me how steady it was. He is 3 years old. His name is Chukwuemeka. He is small and he is brilliant, and he puts his tongue between his teeth when he concentrates, and he runs everywhere he goes because he hasn't learned yet that the world sometimes wants you to slow down. He is the best thing I have ever made, and a DNA test has confirmed that my husband is not his biological father. Seun Bankole went very still. "I am not calling you for money," I said. "I am not calling you to threaten you. I am not here to blow up your Birmingham life. I am calling you for one reason and one reason only. I want you to say it. I want you to look at me through this screen and say what you did." Silence. "Because here is what I know. My drink changed taste.
I woke up in my clothes with no memory and a body that told me a story I refused to read for 3 years. You looked through me at breakfast like I was furniture, and then you transferred to Port Harcourt 2 months later, and you have been living your life as though that night does not exist in the world. I paused. But it does exist. It exists in the form of a 3-year-old boy who deserves to know his full story one day. And I will not carry your guilt along with everything else I am carrying. So I want you to say it. The silence stretched. Seun Bankole looked at the camera, and something collapsed behind his eyes, the calculation giving way to something that may have been shame, may have been fear, may have been the specific exhaustion of a person who has been carrying a thing alone for a long time and is now only relieved of the pretense that they are not carrying it. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice was barely sound, a thread of it. "I'm sorry," he said again, louder, cracked. "Adaeze, I don't—" He stopped. His face was breaking. "I'm sorry." I looked at him for a long moment. I had imagined this call many ways. I had imagined screaming. I had imagined cold, annihilating precision. I had imagined him denying everything and me ending the call with my dignity intact. What I had not imagined was this: a man crumbling on a screen in Birmingham, saying sorry into a camera. Sorry that could not undo anything. Sorry that arrived 3 years and 1 child too late. I felt nothing that I expected to feel. What I felt was tired, a vast, ancient tiredness. The tiredness of a woman who has been holding an enormous thing alone for a long time and is only now setting it down. "I know," I said, and I closed the laptop. Ngozi's hand found mine on the desk. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then she said, "How do you feel?" I thought about it honestly. Like I can breathe, for the first time since the doctor's office. Like I can actually breathe.
I told Chidi about the call that evening. He listened. His face did the thing it did now when I spoke about Seun Bankole. A careful, deliberate blankness. The face of a man managing the temperature of something combustible inside himself. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Did it help?" "Yes." "Good." He nodded slowly. Then it was the right thing to do. He stood up. He went to the kitchen. I heard him filling the kettle, the ordinary sound of a man making tea in the evening, and I sat on the sofa, and I listened to that ordinary sound, and I thought about how much ordinary had cost us, and how much we both wanted it back. He came back with 2 cups. He sat beside me this time, not across from me, beside me, close enough that our arms touched. "I want to tell you something," he said. "Tell me." "The night I sat on the floor of their room, between their beds, I saw you." He looked at me. "I know. I heard you go back to bed." He wrapped his hands around his cup. "I sat there for 2 hours. I was trying to find the reason to stay. Not in the marriage, not with you. You were never the question. With him, with Emeka." He paused. I was sitting there in the dark, trying to decide if biology was going to be stronger than 3 years. My chest tightened. "And then Emeka turned over in his sleep," Chidi said. "He was asleep, deeply asleep, dreaming of whatever a 3-year-old dreams of, probably excavators." He gave a small, involuntary smile. "And in his sleep, he reached out his hand. He reached it out toward my side of the room, like he knew, even in sleep, that I was there. Like even unconscious, he was reaching for me." I could not speak. "And I thought, this child has been reaching for me since the day he was born," Chidi said. "Every time he cried, he was reaching for me. Every time he learnt a new word, he said it to me first to see my face. Every time he is afraid, it is my name he calls. Not because I share his blood, because I showed up, because I was there." He looked at me. "A man who shows up is a father. A man who is simply present in the biology is just a fact. And I have never wanted to be someone's mere fact." I was crying before he finished. Quietly, without drama, the way adults cry when the feeling is too large for performance. Chidi looked at my laughing face. And then he laughed too. And sitting on that sofa in our house in Bagada, with the generator humming and Lagos doing what Lagos does outside our window, and our son sleeping behind the wall, we laughed together, briefly, imperfectly, at the absolute absurdity of everything that had been done to us, and at the fact that we were still here, still side by side, still holding each other's hands.
We did not get to control the timing. We had planned to tell her, eventually, carefully, on our terms. We were still deciding the terms when her other son, Chidi's younger brother Emeka, yes, our Emeka was named for his uncle, came to visit from Enugu, and while Chidi was out and I was bathing the boys, found the DNA report that I had made the catastrophic mistake of leaving on the dining table instead of locking it in the study. He read it, he confronted me, and I had 30 seconds to decide whether to lie to my brother-in-law or tell the truth, and I was so exhausted by secrets, so hollowed out by the weight of managing information, that I simply told him. He called his mother before he left our compound. I called Chidi immediately. He was in the car, 20 minutes away. He drove home in 10. Mama Okonkwo arrived the next morning. She did not come in a taxi this time. She came in her church member Ogatunde's car, and she was in full wrapper and head tie, as if she was dressed for a battle she intended to win. And she walked into our sitting room and she sat down, and she looked at me with the eyes of a woman who has decided before she arrived what the truth is. "My son," she said in Igbo to Chidi, "is this what I am hearing true? Mama, is it true that one of those children is not your blood? Mama, sit down, let me explain. I am sitting, explain." What followed was the hardest conversation of our marriage. Harder than the doctor's office, harder than the first night, because Mama Okonkwo did not come to our sitting room to listen. She came with her conclusion already written, and the conclusion was this: a woman does not come home from a work trip carrying another man's child unless she went there looking for it. She said things that I will not repeat in full. She said them in Igbo and in English both, to ensure there was no ambiguity. She said that the Zobo and Jin story was something she had never heard and did not intend to start believing. She said that women who go on retreats without their husbands were already halfway to the sin that followed. She said that her son had given me everything, and this was how I had repaid him. I sat through all of it. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I had been raised by Igbo parents, and I knew what was owed to age in a room, regardless of what age was saying. I sat in the chair across from my mother-in-law, and I let her pour all of it onto me, and I did not move. What I had not anticipated was Chidi. He let her speak for 3 minutes. Then he said, quietly, but with the full authority of a man who has made his decision and is not negotiating from it, "Mama, stop." She stopped, partly from surprise. What happened to my wife was done to her. She did not choose it, she did not invite it, and she did not know it happened until a doctor told her 3 years later. I have looked into her eyes and I know this to be true, the same way I know my own name. "Chidi, I am not finished." He was not loud. He was the quietest I had ever heard him. "Mama, I am your mother and I love you, and you will always have a place in this house. But if you come into this house again and speak about my wife the way you have spoken today, that place will become harder to find. We are clear, Mama." Silence. Mama Okonkwo looked at her son for a long time. Something moved across her face, the internal adjustment of a woman recalibrating, repositioning, deciding what to do with a son who will not be what she needs him to be in this moment. Then she looked at me. The anger in her face had not left, but beneath it, beneath the hard shell of a woman who had already decided, something else, something that might, in time, with enough evidence, become the beginning of doubt, of openness. "I will pray about this," she said finally. It was not an apology, it was not belief, but it was a door left open where she had intended to build a wall, and I took it. "Thank you, Mama," I said. The twins turned 4 3 months after that sitting room. On the morning of their birthday, before they woke, before the house filled with cousins and balloons and the cake Ngozi had ordered from a bakery in Ikeja, I went to the study and I sat at the desk and I wrote them each a letter. 2 letters. Sealed. Locked in the small wooden box under our bed where I keep the important things, the wedding photographs, the hospital bracelet from the night they were born, the scan photograph from the week we found out there were 2 of them, and Chidi and I had stood in the sonographer's room and held each other and wept. The letters are for when they are old enough. I do not know when that is. I will know when I look at them. But I know what I wrote. To Tobena, I wrote, "Your brother may one day ask you how you feel about the things he will learn about where he came from. I want you to know the answer before he asks. The answer is, he is your brother. Not half, not complicated. Your brother. Born 4 minutes after you, from the same body, in the same hour, screaming the same scream. He is made of the same prayers, the same years of hoping, the same love. Be patient when the world tries to make it more complicated than that. The world will try. Do not let it." To Emeka, I wrote, "There are things about your beginning that I will tell you one day, things that are painful and that were not your fault and not mine. But here is the thing I want you to know first, before any of the complicated things. Your father chose you. Not because the law required it, not because people were watching. He chose you every single morning, freely with his whole self. He chose you when it was hard to choose. He chose you when choosing cost him something. And that choosing, that daily, deliberate, fully human decision, is the only definition of a father that has ever mattered. Blood is a fact. Your father is a choice. And you were chosen. You are loved, you are kept. Whatever else you learn, start there." I sealed the letters. I locked the box. Then I went to wake my sons.
The twins are 6 now. Tobena has started reading chapter books and negotiates bedtime with the precision of a junior advocate, citing precedents and extenuating circumstances, and the particular injustice of being asked to sleep when there are still pages unread. Emeka has moved on from toy excavators to YouTube documentaries about civil engineering and will explain bridge load distribution to anyone who makes the mistake of sitting next to him at dinner. They fight. They fight over the remote, the front seat, the last meat in the stew, perceived unfairnesses so atomic they defy adult comprehension. They protect each other with a ferocity that takes my breath away. When a boy at school was unkind to Emeka, Tobena, 4 minutes older, 3 centimeters taller, located that boy at assembly and delivered a speech about the irrelevance of height to human worth that he had clearly rehearsed. He had heard the last line from his father. Chidi and I are still here. Different than before. Not worse, different. We are people who have been tested in this specific way that reveals character, and we know now, in our bones, what the other is made of. We have a marriage now that is not the marriage we had before the doctor's office. It is harder and more honest and more chosen, and it is more solid for the choosing. The way things that have been broken and carefully repaired are sometimes stronger at the break than they ever were before. Mama Okonkwo came around. It took time. It took several Sunday dinners and watching Chidi with his sons, and watching me with her son, and watching Emeka climb onto her lap and call her mama in that unself-conscious way of his that she never could resist. One evening, about a year after that sitting room confrontation, she called me aside while the men were watching football. She pressed my hand between both of hers. She did not say sorry. In her generation, in her language, sorry was not always a word. It was a gesture, a softening, a change in the quality of how you held someone. She held my hand. I received it. Seun Bankole exists in Birmingham, living his life, carrying whatever he carries. I have not spoken to him since the video call. He sent a message through Ngozi 6 months later, asking if there was anything he could do. I sent a message back. When my son is old enough to know his full story, and if he chooses to know you, I will contact you. Until then,
You live quietly with what you did. That is the entirety of what I ask." He replied, "Understood. I am sorry. I will be sorry for the rest of my life." I read that message once, then I deleted it. I did not need his sorry in my phone, occupying space, keeping itself warm. I know what I am made of now. I am made of that Wednesday in a cold doctor's office, and every day I chose to get up and live after it. I am made of a husband who sat on the floor between his children's beds in the dark and chose at 1 a.m. the harder and more permanent love. I am made of a best friend who said the word assault out loud when I couldn't, who found a man across an ocean and made him answer. I am made of a mother-in-law who came to destroy me and left with her hand in mine instead. I am made of 2 boys who share a room and a birthday and a last name and a father and a mother and every meal and every argument and every ordinary Saturday. 2 boys who are each other's earliest memory and will be, God willing, each other's last. I am made of Tobenna, who reads by torchlight under his blanket after lights out and thinks I don't know. I am made of Emeka, who runs to me headlong, arms wide, with the perfect confidence of a child who has never once considered that the person running toward might not catch him. I will always catch him. That is the whole story. That is the part that was never in any danger, even when everything else was. Some things cannot be taken from you. Some loves were never the biology's to give or remove. Some children are yours not because they came from your body, though Emeka came from my body, every cell of him, and that is also true, but because you would burn the world down before you let anything touch them. That is what it means to be someone's mother. That is what, in the end, it means to be someone's father. The rest is just paperwork.